I started
reason
coughing,
for it and the
and I
case
just
number.
couldn't help
Right.
myself, and I couldn't even talk.
Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for Monday, May 22nd, 2017. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batkins?
Here.
Mr. Batanti?
Here.
Mr. Servil?
Here.
Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. York?
Here.
Mr. Witt here, Mr. Verkast.
Here. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting and public hearing minutes of May 8th, 2017. Approval of the bills in the amount of $1,009,036.68. And approval of a memorial park bench at Waterfront Park.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda with bills in the amount of $1,009,036.68.
All right, is there support?
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. York to approve the consent agenda. Discussion, board members?
Would now be the proper time, as the chair of the EDC, or I mean, of the Environmental Committee, we received a check from Bruce Post.
Well, that wouldn't be a part of the consent agenda though, right?
Okay, I don't know where
No,
it
that's
goes
all right.
in. That's,
Well, you know what? Let's cover it right after this though.
okay.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Now we'll move into announcements.
Yeah. Darren, how much was that check for, do you recall?
500?
No, is it $50 or $100 or something like that, I thought.
I can't remember.
Do I need the amount? If I do, then I'll have to bring it back to a subsequent meeting.
Yeah, yeah, just, I mean, why don't you tell us about it though, as a donation from?
Well, I just got a mail in my box, and came to me. I turned it into the treasurer's office. Didn't know it was even coming. I had attended the last meeting of Save Lake St. Clair, and I had also checked out the post because I am a veteran of Vietnam.
I see.
I'm looking for a new post, so evidently those two things conspired for them to give some money to the cause there,
Okay, and what was the purpose of the donation was for?
to help with the clean out on the lake.
Oh, okay, good, excellent. All right, well, good. Oh, thankful for that. Other announcements, a week ago, we held our Run Like a Mother event to benefit the, let's see, it was HEAL, Helping Ensure Addicts Live.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yeah.
We did skip the regular approval. of
Oh,
the
I'm
agenda.
sorry, that's, yep, sorry about that, thank you. Jumped right into announcements. So we did skip, as Mr. Witt said, approving the agenda. Board members, I proposed the addition of an agenda item as item B3, a water tank, regarding the water tank controls. Otherwise, I'd look to approve ask for the agenda to be approved as amended.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, we've got a motion from Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. Servil. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Boy, there's an
Mr.
odd echo
Super,
in
is
here.
there a feedback?
Yeah,
there's
you know
some
what?
sort
I
of
think
a-
there's a speaker on in the, is there a speaker on in the cable room there, Wally?
Yeah, I don't know how to shut it off.
Oh,
I
I'll
got it,
get,
Darren, Darren, I know what it is.
oh, all
Okay.
right.
All right.
Glad him had some new equipment in there.
Yeah, it's
The only one that would know, I'm surprised you didn't know this.
He's
I
got good
didn't
stuff,
notice it.
so.
So, anyways, as I was saying, we hosted our Run Like a Mother event, the 5K, at the Tucker Senior Center. Very successful event. We had beautiful weather. And one of the beneficiaries was the 501c3, or the charitable arm of 41B District Court, which helps to support the drug and sobriety court program there. So we had a beautiful day, lots of volunteers, thanks to Hanson's and Bob Busquart and Diana Easthope and her family for working hard on making that a successful event. Friday, this past Friday, you may have noticed 18 new trees were planted in the area adjacent to the signature statue at the corner of 16 and Crocker. We were successful in getting an urban forestry grant, and basically the match was our labor. So we provided the labor, the grant provided the funding for the trees, so we have 3 different species of trees to help beautify that area, and we got a pretty substantial amount of volunteer support from the folks from Chrysler, and also our deputy supervisor, Mr. Demchik, worked pretty hard on that as well. He actually wrote the grant and organized a lot of it, and obviously a ton of support from, once again, from beautification. And they were also supportive on Saturday. I announced the young man who's working on his Eagle Scout, who's working on gardens at the senior center. He had his fundraiser Saturday night. Lots of folks from beautification were there, and plenty of folks from the township. We raised about $1,000 for his project. So,
Mr. Supervisor, if you were done?
well, I was just going to also mention the fishing derby, but go ahead.
Regarding the corner of Metro Parkway and Crocker, I hope we all agree that it's really starting to look like something. You know, the statue, the gardens, the trees that are being planted. And while we were planting the trees, I noticed how nicely kept the bank property is there. I mean, it's actually very well kept. I was wondering, in conjunction with that, and if we could maybe somehow encourage our partners at the beach to do a little bit better job of how they trim around those areas. I mean, the grass gets cut, that's great, but in an effort to really improve the look of the corner, we need to do a better job, I think, of trimming the weeds along the curb, just around those areas. So I'm not sure if you have a contact there, but would really be appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then maybe worthwhile to throw a plug in for the fishing derby. I don't know which of you might like to speak to that.
Larry? June 10th, right, 8 o'clock, we have our 14th annual fishing derby up at Metro Beach. I think there's a flyer online. It got placed online, and it's made it onto the Facebook page for you know, you're from Harrison Township one. So if you have any questions, get a hold of Deputy Supervisor, 466-1445.
1445. And there is information on the website, as you said, also. So it's free for the kids to join or to participate. There's prizes and food, and it's a fun event.
Yes.
Is that free fishing day?
Yes,
Yep.
it's free fishing weekend, yeah.
So that should be mentioned, they don't need a fishing license.
Right. Well, kids don't anyways, but the adults, if they accompany them and they want to cast one in, we just won't give them a prize if they get a fish. So, any other announcements? Hearing none, we'll move forward to item B1, approval to contract with Pfeiffer Investigations in the amount of $3,500 to conduct background investigations on candidates. Chief Lopez?
Good evening, board members. As the agenda request states, we have a retirement coming up in the fire department. Sergeant Dulett has indicated he will be retiring June 10th. And so we are looking forward to taking the steps to replacing that position. And one of the first steps is getting our civil service eligibility list and taking the top candidates and then contracting to perform a background check on that candidate before we move forward with a recommendation to hire. Just one clarification with the $3,500 number, it's not $3,500, I'm just asking for up to $3,500. I won't spend anywhere near that, but we've been very fortunate with recent hires that the candidates that we've sent have come back with clean backgrounds, and we were able to move forward with them, but the possibility exists that we could send a candidate or two for a background investigation, come back with a bad result and have to continue the process. So in order to prevent having to come back to the board and possibly be delayed a couple of weeks for a board meeting, just asking for a little extra money, but don't anticipate spending nearly $3,500 for it.
And I think we talked about this the last time around in this cycle, that it could be that someone has a history in another state, and that could, you know, increase the cost, but typically we see that most of the candidates are local and have local work history.
Correct.
So,
Motion to approve up to $3,500 to contract with Pfeiffer Investigations LLC to conduct background investigations on potential firefighter candidates with the money to come from the fire department budget.
Support.
we got a motion by Mr. Tominello, with support by Mr. York. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, item B2, Chief.
Again, thank you. This item is we're continuing to work towards replacing our firefighter turnout gear. As many of you know, we went a number of years where we had to defer those purchases, and each of our employees, per the collective bargaining agreement, has 2 complete sets of firefighter turnout gear, a primary set and then a secondary set. And so, over the years, the age of some of that gear, especially their second set of gear, they started getting quite old and run down, and we've been now for the last couple of years getting back into replacing that gear and getting back up to speed with an annual purchase of gear, so that we don't fall behind again, as we were unfortunately had to in years past. So this 10 sets of gear, it includes gear for our new employees. Obviously, when we hire new people, we have to purchase them a set of gear, and then after their 1 year, when they come off of probation, upon successfully completing, we purchase them their second set at that point. So that way we don't invest in 2 sets up front just in case something goes wrong. But we do have a couple of employees coming up on their 1 year where we have to purchase them their second set of gear, and we have a couple of new employees that need their first set of gear. They're currently using rental gear. And we also have, then the remainder will go for replacing existing firefighters' gear that's quite dated.
Make a motion to purchase 10 sets of firefighting turnout gear and 10 pair of firefighting boots from Phoenix Safety Outfitters at a cost of $26,199.90, with the money to come from the fire department budget.
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Servil. Discussion, board? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Supervisor, before we leave the chief's purchases, I do have a question for him, if I may.
Yeah.
Chief Lopez, we had, there's been discussion over some period of time about the condition of our Jaws of Life equipment. Could you give us a little update on where we're at with that and what the plans are, please?
Yeah, absolutely. That is on our list for purchases, and actually, I have received quotes back that did not meet the week in advance deadline to be on this meeting, but I actually have the agenda request typed up, and it's sitting on my desk for the June 12th meeting, where we'll be purchasing, or I'll be asking to purchase a complete set of extrication equipment for our engine, and then a multi-purpose tool for the Quint at the other station. So we'll be replacing those with the board's approval at the June 12th meeting. We'll be up to speed with the latest and greatest extrication equipment that's on the market.
Good, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, board members.
So next on the agenda, item B3 regarding the water storage tank and the controls. Board members, some of you were members of the Board of Trustees, but I think all of you are familiar with the storage tank that we have that's located roughly at Union Lake and Metro Parkway, set up so that we can reduce our water costs. In essence, the way that it works, or the way that it's structured, is DWSD, and now its successor, GLWA, Great Lakes Water Authority, when they calculate the amount that you pay for water, it's based on a number of factors: how far they have to push the water, how high of an elevation they have to push the water. All these things contribute to the costs. They also look at what the total capacity of their water production is between their 2 plants. And they specifically focus on a peak day and peak hour model for determining how much water you use. So that at one day this summer, there will be the highest demand for water. And they look at that and say, well, that's how much we have to be able to produce at any given time. And they give, I guess we'll say, they give you a break if you don't use a lot of water when there's a high demand for water. Because at that very moment, that determines how many pumps and how much capacity that they have to have. Typically that peak time comes during the summer months, and oftentimes during hot days, either, say, right after work, early evening, oftentimes is that peak time. Sometimes it's in the morning. Depends really on what the weather is, but that's how the contract is structured. Because we are a bedroom community with very little commercial activity, we have a peak demand during that morning and evening time when people are either getting ready for work or coming home from work. And that peak cycle is further exaggerated by the fact that with all the marinas we have kind of the opposite. At certain times of the day, folks could be on their boat or at a marina and they're utilizing an additional demand on the water because we have almost a surge in population. So because of that, we benefit from filling that tank at night and then limiting the amount of water we draw during those peak times from Detroit or from Great Lakes Water Authority, and putting water from the tank back into the system so that we have a more level consumption. They have obviously surplus capacity in the middle of the night, so we can fill the tank all we want. Their plants aren't under any stress for pumping water. So we had the tank in place. I know that the first year it was operational, we looked at what our rate would have been and what our rate was, and the savings were between $250,000 and $300,000, as I recall. I think it was about 1.3 million roughly to put the tank in, 30-year life. So clearly at $250,000 a year, 5-6 years, you've paid off the tank, and at that point forward, it's savings. However, we immediately realized those savings because as soon as that tank is operational, our rates have been roughly $250,000 per year lower than they would have otherwise been. The contract that gives us that benefit also has certain penalties in place in the event that we exceed the amount that we agreed to stay under. Last spring, one of the controllers and sensors that senses the flow failed, and so our communication was incomplete. These sensors basically limit when we're drawing too much from the actual physical delivery pipe that runs parallel to I-94. When we start to draw the max amount, the controllers close those valves down, kind of throttle them down, and then we speed up pumps on the pump station at the tank to put in the amount of water we need to maintain the pressures necessary in the system. Because the two meter pits weren't communicating, they were drawing, but we were getting a zero reading because they weren't sending a reading. And it took us some time. There is a timeline in here so that you have the information. Exhibit B, which is pages 1 and 2 of the packet that I passed out, explain the first failure at meter pit 1, how we initially had to kind of figure it out what to do. And one of the biggest limiting factors is we currently do not have a means of manually operating this. We're 100% dependent on the controls. So we began to work with the suppliers on this to find out what failed, what needed to be replaced, ordering parts and so forth, which took a fair amount of the summer. As a result of that failure and that, for lack of a better word, a backup plan or redundancy in the system, we had exceedances several times throughout last summer season. Detroit, I think, goes from, is it June 1 to August, at the end of August, right? So you look at June, July, and August, those are those peak months, and they're gonna measure that total flow of the system, and whatever day is the highest and whatever hour is the highest, they look at what your consumption was and what your peak flow was for that hour and for that day, and that's what your threshold is. Because our system wasn't operating properly, we exceeded what we had contractually promised to be under on that day. The contract with DWSD, and later as a successor, GLWA, allows GLWA to charge up to, I think it's 3 times what the exceedance is. I have a figure. I'm gonna tell you it was something like it's like in excess of $600,000 is what it would have cost of additional charges for water. We sat down in the fall, throughout the winter, and even in the early spring with the folks from Great Lakes Water Authority to discuss this. Ultimately, between us and GLWA, come up with, or the GLWA team, a subset, an attorney and an engineer, different folks that are involved in the process, come up with a proposed agreement, an agreed upon settlement relative to some sort of a penalty. We counter-proposed with the request to say, first and foremost, this was not malicious in nature, and we know today, after the fact obviously, that one of the things that is lacking in our controls is some level of redundancy in what happens if. So what can we do? What can we do in advance? So for example, some things are real simple. Having additional spare parts. If we have a couple of critical components and they're long lead items, have an additional one on the shelf. They're common for both meter pits. One fails, we can put it in place. Some of those things are easy. Some of them, though, were some redundancy in our communications or in our SCADA. Some of them were, it caused us to explore other options. Well, what happens if there's certain power failures or brownouts? So we went through this whole process with Great Lakes Water Authority to determine what it is that our system should have so that this doesn't happen in the future. And even if something does fail, what can we do so that we could manually operate this, oversee this and avoid these exceedances? Our proposal to them was, as opposed to assigning a strictly punitive charge, we asked and ultimately agreed to negotiate to a lower penalty with the understanding that the rest of the money that we wouldn't be paying in the form of a penalty, we'd be paying in the form of structural and logical control improvements to the system so that we wouldn't likely go through this exercise again. We came to an agreement. The way the contract reads is if the two parties come to an agreement, they have, is it the analytical work group? Yes. I think it was. So that you basically meet with your peers. Yeah, we were out in Lathrop Village. We had, in that case, Bruce Township had an exceedance last summer. I think there might have been another community. So we collectively present to whatever set of peers happen to show up at that analytical work group meeting, explain what occurred, explain what we propose to do to fix it, and then ask for feedback from those peers. And while not everybody agreed with that proposal, the majority agreed that the proposal that we had was fair. No one objected, so we proceeded with that. This results in two things. One is we made a commitment to make these improvements to our system, and it's actually at the very end of this packet. That's page 17 and 18 of the packet, the last 2 pages. This is the document from Wade Trim, which is the result of a pretty substantial amount of work back and forth with the controls, with our people, Dave and Justin and the guys, literally, walking through it and determining. I think I included in here. It's probably hard to read, but pages 13 and 14 show what we created to be kind of a logic model, a sort of a flow chart of if this happens, then this occurs. If something else happens, then you receive this signal, so on and so forth. So between including redundancy, having backup spare parts, and doing some electrical changes, rewiring, and controls changes, we came up with something that both sides agreed would be an improvement. Wade Trim has prepared this work, received estimates on the pricing for materials and labor, and presented that to us actually, although it's dated the 19th today. And I really don't want to wait 3 more weeks. Our next board meeting is 3 weeks away. So we talked about bringing it before the board today for discussion, because June 1st is really the beginning of this peak season. And if we have a warm early summer, I'd really like these improvements to be in place by that time. So, one issue before us is the scope of work as described on pages 17 and 18. Work to be done at HR 1 and HR 2. And then, and that's one board action or board motion. The second thing that's before us is, and I can say, if you, as you go through this packet, just for whatever it's worth, pages 3 through 14 were the actual corrective action plan as we designed and worked up of the things that we committed to. It's important to note that in the process of doing this, we talked about the fact that the flow controls and measurement devices at meter pit 1, which is the primary meter pit at Union Lake and Metro Parkway, are an older style and one that we can't piggyback off of. Previously, when DWSD ran the system, they would not allow local municipalities to access any of their controls. You couldn't take readings off of them. GLWA, amongst the many improvements they've made, they've said, well, look, if we've got something there and you can just pull a wire off of it and get an additional reading, there's some redundancy there. So one of the things we talked about was, well, you know, should we work with or partner with GLWA to upgrade the series of controls and flow measurement devices at meter pit 1 or station 1, so that we could piggyback off of that? Should they take it over? Should we make improvements to that meter pit? Because currently, as it's designed, it's a confined space. It's an old, aged meter pit. We talked about whether or not that ownership should remain with the township or whether that should be GLWA. So there were a lot of other discussions that went into this, but in the end, this corrective action plan of the series of things we would do and what would happen if various things occur are kind of outlined here in pages 3 through 14. Pages 15 and 16 is correspondence between GLWA and the township explaining, as a result of those exceedances, what the additional fees or costs are for the 12 months of water consumption that would be July 1 of 16 to June 30 of 17. So basically, in the month of January, they said, okay, here's what we'll agree to, but this is going all the way back retroactively to July 1 of that year. So there was a known amount of consumption, so you owe us this amount backward, and we'll be charging a slightly higher rate for the months of January through June. And if you do everything you said, then your rate will drop back down to the agreed upon rate based on a lower consumption. So at some point, whether it be this evening or at some point in the future, if board members want to do a little bit of research on it, it would be my proposal to take that additional amount that is basically that we're paying for water from July 1st of last year through June 30th of this year, and whatever that amount is, divide it up or basically amortize it over the next 5 years, split it up into fifths, and might come out to be adding an additional $25,000 over the course of a year, spread out over all of the units of water. The board could say, well, they don't wish to do that. We can have that discussion at a future time. But because we have a standing board motion that says whatever the commodity cost or whatever the cost from GLWA is for the water, that's built in automatically to the rates every July 1st. So in essence, there's an acknowledgement that for this current cycle, we went into July 1 last year using rates based on what was our agreed upon rate, but toward the end of 2016, we realized we had the overages, we discussed a penalty. They assigned that additional slightly higher rate all the way back to July 1 through June 30. So the rate that we're charging now is less than what, at least the component for the commodity cost is lower than what our cost actually went from 5.92 per thousand cubic feet to 6.63 per thousand cubic feet. So basically that would be an adjustment. So the board would need to say, well, let's spread that out over 5 years, let's eat that cost. That's a separate discussion. It's not necessarily time sensitive. But the improvements to the pump station are time sensitive. And it was no small task, although it might seem like it, to get to this point, and to get these controls hammered out. The people that do this work are pretty high demand, and it's an area that we're certainly learning, but we're not experts in. So I might draw a parallel. If we have a water main break tomorrow, we've got a crew of folks that are, excellent at it, and are intuitive at fixing it. But the entry into the storage and pumping system, it comes with a certain amount of learning. So this year we learned a little bit. No small part of which was, in hindsight, we probably should have built more redundancy into our tank. But ultimately, before you today on page 17 is a request for a cost not to exceed $22,532 to make the various improvements outlined within the May 19th letter to meter pits 1 and 2. I asked Dave also to come, so that any questions or any issues or discussion anyone might have. It wouldn't normally be something I'd want to bring last minute, but based on the timing, I didn't think it should wait 3 weeks.
I'd have to concur with you. This seems like a small price to pay to avoid this in the future, but I have a couple questions. Sure. Did I understand you to say we went 3 months last summer without knowledge that we were exceeding the flow from the city of Detroit?
No, we didn't go 3 months without knowledge. We'll say we went days without knowledge. We went a day or two without, we had to learn that the problem existed. But what we realized were a couple of things. One is part of our protocol is that we have to have a better system of notification to GLWA. Our initial reaction was to say, well, let's see, how can we fix this and what can we do? Well, we realized we didn't have the ability to operate the system truly manually. We learned from our peers at the analytical work group that several of them do have that ability, and when something like this happens, they'll station someone in that pit 24/7 or in that pump station to monitor those flows and adjust them as required. We didn't have that, so that's one of the things. It took us 3 months, maybe not quite, but somewhere's around there, to get all the parts in place and fix it and get it back to an automated state.
And we are approximately maybe 8 months later, or 9 months later. That's due to the fact that you had to negotiate with Great Lakes Water Authority to come up with a resolution to this and negotiate the overcharges?
That was a part, that's certainly a large part of it. Coming up with a solution was a large part, but then once we said, okay, this is what we intend to do, then there was also the actual step of meeting with different folks in the controls business to say, okay, what system do you have, what needs to be done, well, hey, had you considered maybe you could do it this way? We came up with things like, for example, plugs for generators. When the system was set up, nobody really outfitted some of those to be able to say, okay, well, can you power these control systems with a small generator to have things operating, that sort of thing.
Okay, so just to understand, are we paying a penalty other than the fact of course, we have to pay for the surplus water we used?
Well, it isn't a surplus water. It's what it is because we
that's
used
true.
more at one time, they raised the rate.
Okay.
So if we look at page 16, we should have been paying, the acknowledgement was, for example, in the month of July, was our highest month of consumption for months July through November, which makes sense. Obviously, July is one of the peak months. So we used 12,359.2 units of water. We should have been paying a fixed price per unit of $5.92, and a fixed monthly charge of $68.08. So we anticipated, and we were billed for July, $141,966. Call it $142,000. The second chart shows that what it should have been with the adjusted rates was we would have paid $159 instead of $142, or roughly another $17,000 in the month of July. That's a peak month. The month of November is almost half that amount, so there you're looking at only about $13,000 more in additional charges. So it wasn't necessarily additional water we received, but a
Okay,
higher rate per
I
unit.
understand now.
Yep.
But, so the total, cost of water for that's into this year also, right, up through June 30th or something?
Yep,
So, the projected cost is 619 and change, and it should have been, it would have only been 344. Are we paying the difference in that?
No,
Is
so-
that the difference you're
yeah, so what
talking
it
about?
was is for those 5 months, for the 5 months, July through November, which was what billing had already been completed and paid, we had paid 619, we'll call it 620,000, and that should have been 694. So they said, okay, well, you've underpaid 74,000, so we're gonna split up that 74,000 over the next 6-7 months, whatever that was. And moving forward, instead of charging you 592, we're gonna charge you 663, and instead of a $68,800 fixed monthly charge, we're gonna switch to 77,000. So this was the correspondence from them saying, here's what your back charges are, and here's what your new rate will be. So if you can say, well, we use 74,000 inside of 5 months, you might roughly double that, probably on the high side, because that includes the months of July and August, which are by far the highest months. Springtime, there's usually not a lot of watering, maybe June starts to climb up there. So that 74,000 probably equates to more than half of the penalty.
Okay, now the 592 was for the period of 16 through 17, but there's an escalator built into the system, isn't there? We don't constantly pay 592 in
Yeah, we
you know,
do,
in the
it's actually,
future.
yep, well, not for in perpetuity. Come July 1, we'll have a new rate, and we'll have, so, but one year at a time, from July 1 to June 30, we have a rate agreed upon, every
Okay.
ratepayer does, every wholesale ratepayer does, and that's the amount you pay per unit and a fixed monthly charge.
But assuming we retrofit all of this stuff and don't have these overages, then we're gonna roll back to the original contract pricing?
What we'll do is technically would roll back to 5.92, plus
have
any
been-
amount that's an increase built into the system.
Okay.
So I think it would be unrealistic to say we'd be back to where we were in terms of the actual rate, but we'll be back to where we were in terms of those measurables that define what our rate is. So we'll be back to the reduced rate associated with the storage.
So if we do all of these things, we will have redundancy and we will be able to monitor on a closer basis to avoid the using in peak time exceeding our peak usage.
Right, yeah, so we'll have the ability to monitor redundancy, also the manual operation.
Yes, so,
Yep.
listening to Mr. Verkust and dealing with this, and, it has been a long road, and there's many contractors, I shouldn't say that's the wrong way to say it. There's limited contractors that do this type of work, and that's why it took so long to get where we're at right now. We have everybody lined up, so that's why I pushed and came to see Mr. Verkust today, wanting this coming forward tonight, because I have people in line for the SCADA, for the programming, for the PLC, the change, and obviously Wade Trim's electrician is going to change all the wiring, so that we have redundancy. Instead of losing it at the PLC, it will still stay to the SCADA. We get these readings, because we got the readings for a few days, and they were messed up. We're like, okay, something's wrong, something going on. But the controller issue, that was another issue where we didn't have one in stock, that we could just go out there and plug and play and have them reprogram or get things moving for us again. Now we do. That's just one step we've taken. The generators will be another step, so that if there is a power outage, we don't get dinged. This is all in our contract, so that we don't get dinged with anything like this. You know, we don't have power, we can't read it. We will be able to read it. We will have these readings. Mr. Verkust brought up the meter pit and piggybacking on to GLWA. That was an option that we negotiated with them also. That meter pit needs to be completely revamped. Mr. Brock, when he was here, and I'm not throwing stones, he, for some reason, wanted ownership of that, which was very unusual, even for the city of Detroit to relinquish that, and they did. Now GLWA said that, why would you want ownership of it, and they agreed to take it back. So in turn, we could have paid a substantial amount of money to get that done, so we could have piggybacked off of them. And then when I say a substantial amount of money, it's into the $500,000 to $700,000 range. Instead, we can wait a year to 2 years, and they will do everything on their own, and we still get to piggyback onto their system at no charge, and be able to pick up their WAMR data the now time frame to where if we still have a problem, we're picking up their data, getting our readings, and everything moves forward. We just didn't have redundancy. It's sort of like the laptop sitting in front of you. Everything that went in there, it changes daily. I mean, there's newer, better technology, and every tank system is different. You know, there's elevated tanks, there's ground reservoirs, different sizes, different pumps, you know, booster pumps as opposed to different style pumps, and when things are done. So this is all part of the master plan to get us so that this never happens to us again.
The SCADA system is still vulnerable until you do something more to have some redundancy there? Generator or battery backup or something?
They are actually working on that right now. They have been working on that, I should say. And the electrical work is needed so that the way that it was wired originally going into the PLC and not the SCADA or vice versa, we want so that we get this no matter what. Right now, we don't. If there's a power issue, we don't get that SCADA. We will get it now. And those are all things that are gonna contribute to us being able, Justin and Jeff have really stepped up and taken ownership of this tank out in the field. And as Mr. Burkess said, it's a learning curve for all of us. I mean, we've always been a distribution system that buys our water from at the city of Detroit, now GLWA. Bringing this in has been a big learning curve for all of us. You know, mechanically and fixing the valves and doing things like that, we can do all of that. This technology is a whole different aspect of the game. And we're learning, and this was a very unfortunate mistake, and we just don't want it to happen again.
Last question. If I remember correctly, that tank is 750,000 gallons?
Yes, sir.
How much do we actually draw down from day to day on average?
In the peak times, we use everything. It goes to about a 3-foot level. We fill it completely, and then it goes into the system every day, and then it fills again that night. Now, during the off-season, it's basically what's called the daily flow mode, where we keep things moving so that the water doesn't freeze. We keep fresh water, you know, chlorinated fresh water at all times. It's a daily operational mode where we send so much in, we send so much out. Because obviously in the off-season, we're not, you know what it's like here. You've lived here a long time, and the summertime, it is just a crazy place here. Like Mr. Guest was saying, with the marinas, Conger Bay, Belmar Harbor, we've had issues, knowing the water issues, and it's a whole different world from summer to winter here.
So for the foreseeable future, do you see a problem with the capacity of that tank? And
No,
and
I
the
don't see-
parameters that we have with the Great Lakes Water Authority, our contractual?
As far as the capacity of the tank and the parameters, no. The only problem we have right now are the issues at hand with the controls and the SCADA, and getting that under control, where we have redundancy. What GLWA more or less told us is, we don't care, if this tank goes down, you need to be able to show me that you can run it. And we will now have a manual mode and backup SCADA that's gonna give us this ability so that this doesn't happen. And please, don't, as God is my witness, mechanical failures happen, they're man-made parts, I can't control that. But we are doing everything to the best of our ability so that this doesn't happen again. But as I said, this controller failure, this wasn't something that I could just say, gee, I'm gonna run to Menards and pick up. This took months to get, and then it had to be programmed and everything else, and that's a very tough pill to swallow. Now we've worked with these suppliers, and this should not happen again.
Perhaps my questions, many questions, were taken wrongly. I wanted the people out in TV land to understand this is a complicated process, and you walk through it the right way. We were neophytes. I was a big booster of this, and I still am. I think it was a smart move, and it looks like it's paid off. Even though we do have some penalties here, we've probably still saving money.
100%. I appreciate you saying that, because it is obviously proven itself in the short time period, the money that we have saved. This was an unfortunate setback, something hopefully that we can avoid in the future. We hope that this will never happen again, but as we say, the technology changes continually, and we need to stay up with that. So as I come to you, that's why I'm coming to you, so that I stay on top of this, the guys in the field stay on top of it, and we stay in compliance. That's the thing with the contract.
I'll add also, keep in mind that there's this actual exceedance is a particular day, a particular time. So, so that what GLW, what we learned is other customers that are storage customers, they do have, it's inevitable, as Mr. Axtell says. You could have a mechanical failure, you can have a power outage, you can have some unit go. And so if you say, well, hey, it was on some odd day that wasn't necessarily that peak day, you show an exceedance, you want to be able to show it happened that day, here's what was the cause of it, and here's how we fixed it. You know, there are times when we'll talk about issues related to, I think one time when we reviewed a contract, we talked about, there was a spike, I believe.
Major spike.
Right, and so we had several water main breaks, and they said, wow, what occurred on this day for you to have such an elevated water flow on that particular day? And we were able to go back, check the records, and see that that's what it was, because there was a pressure surge. But I think the important point is that the folks at GLWA aren't saying, well, if you have a mistake, sorry, you're done. They're saying, okay, well, if you tell us right away when you have a problem, if you have done everything you can conceivably do beforehand to prevent it within any economic reasonableness, then we're really not looking for a penalty. We'd rather see our customers that are storage customers have robust systems and procedures in place, and we believe that's what this is.
So it's my understanding, Mr. Servlet asked some very good questions. This expenditure puts us in a position where we should not be in a situation again where we are unaware of the problem, and when it does occur, there's a manual way to address it.
Yes, sir.
In a nutshell, thank you. And so that's good. The notion of water rates and the subject of ownership got brought up. I think those are, when I hear ownership, it starts, you know, a light bulb goes off now. So I think those are big enough subjects, Mr. Supervisor, and would seem to be complex enough that it would warrant us, you know, maybe having a workshop to look at rates, you know, what our current, what the current value is in the water fund, you know, project out. I think it's a big subject that needs to be discussed at a workshop level.
Yeah, well, that's fine. We won't ultimately even know what, we know what the penalty is relative to the rate. No one can know what our consumption is through June 30 of this year. So the actual charge versus what we anticipated the charge to be on the non-penalty rate, we won't know that until sometime in July anyways.
Are we up against any type of deadline to determine what rates should be? Do
No.
we have, all right, so,
In essence, all we're gonna be doing is not collecting the necessary income to cover that, so we'd be spending down from fund balance and then
Right.
saying later we'll catch that up.
Yeah, if we don't replace it, and let's just say that come June 30, we look at all the consumption and we say, you know what, we spent $140,000 in actual commodity costs to GLWA, $140,000 more than we thought. This board could say, well, that should come from fund. This board should say, well, some of it should come from fund, and some of it should be applied to rates. Or all of it applied to rates.
and my only point to that would be that we be allowed sufficient time and information to make an informed decision about that prior to any suggestion about what rates should be. That's all I would say.
Yeah, there can be a discussion. All I was saying was you know, as a simple thing, after the fact, you determine what that amount is, and you say, okay, I'm gonna split it up over 5 years, you know, divide it up equally, so that, you know, 5 years from now, I will have collected an additional, you know, 30,000, 25,000 a year. That's all I was saying. It could
I
be as
understand.
simple as that if the board chose to do that. If we wanna look at it in further depth, that's,
I certainly would like to. I think there's more questions to be asked than that. I think that, at least that's my position. I'd like to see us spend more time than we would take normally at a board meeting to look into that.
Fair
Just
enough.
my recommendation.
So after all said and done, it looks to me that we're getting the citizens or the water sewer customers, the total amount that we're getting adjusted for is $74,069.72.
No, that's so far.
that was through November. That was including the months of July, August, September, October, and November. And then the December usage, which is billed in January, as well as January through June, is at a higher rate.
Okay, so that's gonna go up probably to 150,000, 160,000.
As I said, it's probably less. Yep,
All right.
yes, probably less than
So-
150. I estimate about 140.
Okay, so that being said, and I remember Mr. Ulinsky, we have an engineer that engineers all this stuff. And Mr. Ulinsky, when he's sitting on this board, he was a controls guy. And with our SCADA and with our, even when we we talked about this water tank back long before we actually installed it. You know, and he always said, we need to be using common controls. That was one of his big thing. Why are we using these privately owned controls that only one company makes? And that was his big thing. And in this case, you know, the township trustees probably don't know this, but I know Adam, Ken, and I, and certainly Dave and the water guys know that you do whatever you need to do to keep that peak number down in July. And it's normally the third or fourth week in July every year, because that determines your rate for the whole year. And it seems to me that on May 27th of 2016 through August 30th of 2016, when that controller was actually put in, I don't get why somebody for $6,000, which was the cost of the new controller, why anybody would wait and just put it in, knowing that we had a peak rate coming up and we could possibly be clipped. And this isn't the first time we were clipped. We were clipped a few years ago, I think about 6 or 7 years ago. That's when we put in the water tank, because we had that high peak and we had got a penalty rate.
We didn't get a penalty, we didn't realize the savings as soon as we'd hoped. Right?
Okay. But, I mean, clearly, May 27th it fails. We call right away to Jet Pump. Then June 6th, we contact them. Then from May 27th to June 6th, Jet Pump comes out to diagnose the issue. Then it's June 21st, they call us to inform us that it needed to be replaced and it wasn't covered by warranty. They give us two options. Then July 12th, we had not yet received the pricing. July 13th, so a full month and a half almost after we get pricing information. July 25th, the township board approves the purchase of the controller. I don't care. I don't need to vote on something like that, to be honest with you. If it comes down to it, we need to just do whatever we need to do.
So Mr. Yeager, if I may, that's exactly what this is doing.
But I get all that, but I don't understand why somebody before August 30th, when Jet Pump installed the final product, did we not, like, right away just order a new controller for $6,000 rather than, you know, especially with this, we all know, well, some of us know that there's this penalty rate because we were negotiating. I happened to be in the negotiations when we redid the contract and learned a whole lot about water that I didn't know before. And, you know, the biggest thing is that peak flow rate, right? So because we didn't spend $6,000 on May 30th or whatever, now we're $140,000. That doesn't make any sense.
No, well, so.
But moving forward, I think we need to start looking at doing common controls rather than these, you know, companies, whatever. I don't know Jet Pump, but, you know, rather than their product, maybe use, you know, Johnson Controls or something that's more where we can get our hands on product quicker if we needed to, right? So that's really all I have to say, that sometimes things, we gotta do what we gotta do to get it working, you know?
Okay, so if I may, this, for one, this project back in 2010, when the tank went in, was a design build. This was not a weight trim design engineer, this was a design build product. Before my time sitting in this chair, I was a field worker at the time, okay? So I was out there, one of the guys, turning valves and hydrants and trying to simulate flows and do everything we could to make this thing operate. It's been a long road, really long road for this tank, and that's putting it mildly. But as far as these parts and things go, the parts, this controller is part of Clayval, which is a company that has subcontractors, which was Kennedy Industries. They then switched to Jet Pump. This is part of what I was saying is, we called them immediately, and this is how long it took to get that controller into our possession, and then get it programmed and on. And I understand what you're saying about, okay, well, let's go to someone else, but the thing is, DWSD before GLWA had Clayval PRBs in our pit. These are, and if you don't think that I've lost sleep over this and done my homework, it would cost the township $500,000 or so for me to change those PRBs out to go to a different company that I may have different results with. Okay, believe me, I understand what you're saying 100%, and you won't hear one bit of denial out of me or disagreement. But we have done everything that we can at this point. I understand simple controls, and believe me, I wish it were that simple. I wish they were valves that I was operating, and I didn't have wires, and I didn't have the SCADA, and I didn't have things so that everybody in this room and listening on TV and my guys at the shop could just go out and simply do this. It is just not that simple. That's why everybody has a different profession in life. All I can tell you is right now, this plan was put in place because of what happened. This is our action plan to fix it, and I will move forward and do everything I can. Like I said, I can apologize till I'm blue in the face, but I didn't make that controller fail. I tried to fix it and get a solution, and that's what we're doing now.
I mean, I'm looking back, right, obviously.
And it was
But
before
I didn't know that this was going on. I would've said order the thing right away. I
Well,
mean-
the thing
I mean,
is, we didn't
someti-
know it needed to be
well,
ordered right
Wait a
away.
minute, sometimes, you know, you try and save a buck, is it under warranty or not? With the peak rate coming, like I said, and that's the only time that you would do that, right? If it's January, February, March, we have this low rate.
So let me-
Doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
But we all know that because it's just such a big discussion, and you know that, and Ken, you know that, the peak rate is such a huge part of that rate, that, you know,
It's the backbone, I
You know-
get it, but, so the solution, and so what I did today, when I received this from Wade Trim, part of our policy in the past, obviously, I have a $5,000 spending limit, so $22,000 surely exceeds that. But I called Ken, and then met with Adam, and we discussed this, because I have in the past gone to them, or when Glenn was here, and I've done it with Dennis, I believe, once. You, as a full-time official, Ken and Adam, have the right to say, yes, go ahead and do this. And then we bring it to a later board meeting. But because we had a board meeting tonight, we brought it to you out of common courtesy to say, look, this is what's going on. We're gonna spill our beans, and this is what has to be done. I'm not here because I wanna ask for $22,000 to go play in the sand. I'm asking to do this because I have to keep this operation of the township moving.
oh no, I agree, I would've said, spend the $22,000 30
And I
days,
wish
because
it were
we're,
that simple.
we're in a
I wish my-
window.
We didn't know that, though.
We're-
That's the whole point.
No, I
We-
get it.
We didn't know what the
Right.
solution was.
That's what I'm saying, I'm looking back now, right?
Right.
And
that's why
and
I
I'm
was-
looking back as somebody who wasn't involved in this, and somebody that's reading this would make the assumption,
understand.
right, that from May 27th to August 30th, why didn't we get a controller in and put it in?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Knowing about the peak flow, and I don't wanna argue it, I don't need.
No, we're
to,
not
you know,
arguing it.
and-
No.
And I don't need an explanation, I'm just saying that a reader
Connection with the company, and then
Right.
would come to that conclusion.
Right, and so to that point, I can say this. First of all, as I said in the beginning, this process is a learning process. If it were a water main break, we don't have to learn how to fix water main breaks. We got a great group of guys that can do that in incredible time and efficiency. This, however, is not something we've historically done. So when we had this failure, it wasn't a, here's the part we need to replace, it's a, what's wrong with the system? That's number one. So there was a learning curve. Number two, to that point, when we went through the analytical work group meeting, we were surrounded by peers that had storage systems, many of whom have gone through a penalty phase because they had a problem with their system and they had an exceedance. So I was surrounded by experts after the fact, but I was surrounded by my peers in other communities that had also paid penalties because they had exceedances. And what that told me is this process of going from one level of system where you're basically just a straight off customer, dependent on GLWA or DWSD as it previously was, to going to operating your own system is a step, and we're not the only community that, you know, misstepped a little bit at some point in that process. So, you know,
Mr.
I
Chair-
wish we hadn't done that, but I think in hindsight, you know, we're not certainly the only ones that had to go through that process with GLWA or DWSD.
Make a motion to approve the electrical improvements to the meter and storage tank controls as proposed by Wade Trim at a cost not to exceed $22,532.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Witt, with support by Mr. Servil. Well, we had a fair amount of discussion. Is there further?
I do got, so sounds like we're gonna do a workshop on the actual Cause I got a couple points, but we've beat it up pretty good right now, so.
Yeah.
I would move on to my comment just on the weight trim proposal.
Well, so specific to that, it's the subject of workshop, if we just stop for a moment. Because we have two new trustees and one trustee that's, certainly not new, but less than a term, I'd asked the auditor if, the auditor will typically give a more in-depth report to the three full-timers, and then give a kind of an abbreviated report, at the township meeting. So I'd suggested, all the time being the same, when he gives that more lengthy presentation, that we might do that in the form of a workshop. And then his presentation at a board meeting could be very brief, because we'd have all sat through it at the workshop. But I think that workshop format gives us a chance to ask those questions and have some of that discussion. Following that, when we began the year and we talked about, what plans and ideas we might want to have, one of the things was to have some recurring workshop financially. So at least this first workshop would be to go over the audit, kind of ask some questions about the various funds, because it is a pretty lengthy document. And then after that, which would likely be after the end of this fiscal water year, which ends June 30, we might have another to look at where we're at in the budget, so far year to date, and that might be an appropriate time to have that discussion.
Okay. Just regarding the weight trim, proposal, it indicated here that HR 2 is not in compliant electrically. Dave, is that, you said it was a design build back in 2010, so there's been changes to the electrical standard since that time, or
No,
was it
it's not.
installed incorrectly?
No, only due to us now installing a generator. It has nothing to do with what was installed at the time.
Okay,
We are
HR
now-
choose the pit.
We are,
It's the new
It's
one
the new
up by
pin up
Joy
at Joy
Boulevard.
Boulevard.
okay,
so no, that's all new technology, but we are installing a generator, and so now some things will change there.
okay, thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
William Bartle, 20-year resident. I just want to ask real quick. Understand learning curve, Cinderella story, that's great. I'm just wondering, food for thought, if anybody did a simple calculation of cost-benefit analysis to figure if we're like up around 20%, it's a pretty easy equation to do. For cost-benefit analysis, it's basic applied algebra. But yeah, there's always going to be a battle between new technology and old technology and how they intermix. And I tell you what, it changes so doggone fast. And to try to retrofit some of this stuff, a lot of times it's better to replace a lot of these controllers and everything, and get with the new stuff. Redundancy is a great thing. I know if you walk into a hospital or something and you walk into a mechanical room and you wonder why there's 18 pumps in a line, and one of them, if that strainer gets full, it goes to the next pump. If one pump's bearings get too hot, it goes to the next pump. Alarm goes off, a guy gets a beeper, or in his computer room, he's got to pull that strainer, do that strainer. So redundancy is a great thing, but just wondering if anybody would like to do a simple, basic cost-benefit analysis. I don't know. I'm guessing that we got a 20% cost-benefit analysis from it. I don't know. And as far as the slap on the wrist, I hope it doesn't last too long and we get back to the lower rate. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. The best I could say, the first year, I think, that we realized the benefit in rates was either, I think it was 12-13, so from 2012 to 2013. The rate at that, and I could be off a year, I'm just going by memory. The savings at that time was estimated, at the time GLWA said, well, this is what it'll cost you if you consume what you roughly did last year in terms of water. And here's what it would have cost you, and that difference was between 250 and 300,000. So let's just call it 280,000. So even with this additional 140 penalty, if you will, or paying $140 more, we still save $140,000 from July 1st of last year to June 30. So I don't know if that satisfies the cost-benefit analysis. The idea being, we're saving over $250,000 per year, and it's expected to be 30 years, and that, as the rates go up, that savings as a percent is likely to become greater per year also.
We only have savings, you had to pay $1 million for the water tank, so your savings only becomes apparent after you've already paid off your water tank. So.
Well, and I
so that
said
wouldn't
about
be-
5 years of savings would
that
pay off the
wouldn't
water
be
tank.
until like 17 or 18, when we were actually gonna get a savings.
Our rates immediately came down, but, and we're not paying that, we're not charging an artificially higher rate to pay that back. So make sure we understand.
I get it.
As soon as the rates dropped, due to that water tank, our rates dropped. The ratepayers in the township, their rates dropped. We haven't artificially increased that rate to pay back that 1.3 million. So the savings as it is from GLWA was immediate. If the board wishes to add on a fee to recoup that 1.3 million, that's the will of this board, but that's not how our rate structure is structured.
Well, I'd like to point out one other thing. I know we've been on this a long time, but we did have a major water break at the westbound I-94 entrance off of Metro Parkway a few years ago. And that was, I believe that was before we had the water tank, was it not?
Oh, yeah, that was before we had HR2.
We were out of water as a township for that period of time while it was repaired.
Yep.
I believe that tank would have probably, especially announcing emergency use of water, we could have got through that and people would have still been able to flush their toilets.
And I was more so HR2 is the reason, that's the reason we put in HR2 is so we can shut down and
So-
feed the system from the rest of
Yeah.
it.
There's no doubt in my mind that this is the cost-benefit ratio there. You can argue about semantics of how long it's gonna take before we start realizing true savings, but we will.
What we've done, it's huge, and as Mr. Witt alluded to, and Mr. Burkest and yourself, the water break took place in 2011. The water tank construction, design and construction started in 2010. So, you know, and then that.
I think the break was 10. I was not supervisor. Tony was supervisor.
It was the end of his final year.
It was
or-
10, yeah.
So
Nine or
that water break is what brought that project HR2 back to this board to get a second feed from, at that time it was DWSD, now GLWA. So having one on the far side of the township adjoining Executive Boulevard and having this one is now, there's a huge redundancy step. That water break takes place there, we can shut down, we have another feed coming in this township, we still would have been operational.
Well, and we have operated off of HR2.
And we've operated solely off of that when we've had a problem with this one.
Yep.
That's another redundancy issue that is covered in this cap plan and that we're moving to improve.
All right, any other discussion, board?
I
Hearing
think we
none?
used our 3 minutes up.
Yeah, I think so.
Hockey game started.
We have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Servial to authorize Wade Trim to perform the work described at a fee not to exceed $22,532. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on the agenda, item C1, board members, the term of the Employee Pension Board member, Constance Miller, is due to expire June 23rd, 2017. Ms. Miller has been a valuable member of the board, and she wishes to continue to serve. I would recommend a motion to reappoint Constance Miller to the Employee Pension Board for a 2-year term to expire June 23rd, 2019.
So moved. Support.
Got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you, board. Next, item D1. Board members, at the February 27th, 2017 regular board meeting, the board approved the advertising and interviewing for the position of maintenance worker. After conducting advertising and interviews, Mr. Chester Buffa is highly qualified for the position, and I'm recommending Mr. Buffa to the position of maintenance worker in the Water and Sewer Department at a rate of $19.11 per hour, plus benefits as defined in the ASME collective bargaining agreement, subject to the completion of a successful 90-day probationary
So
period.
moved.
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello. Discussion?
How do we arrive at the starting rate? Is that contractual?
Yeah, it's in the contract. Yep, steps are all negotiated.
Great, thanks.
Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Board, and thank you.
I was gonna say, new person in the audience, welcome aboard. I didn't-
Okay, next on our agenda is regarding a approval to hire a contractor to repair the handicap doors in the engineering building. Board members, the handicap doors in the engineering building are in need of repair. We reached out to 5 different companies requesting quotes. We received 2 quotes, and those quotes are attached. Advanced Door Specialties, $98.90, and Great Lakes Security Hardware, $43.80.
So do we wanna do the 4380? Is that,
It would appear to be that way. I'm looking to see, I can't see, the recommendation wasn't listed.
Correct, it's the
Yeah.
4380.
Right.
make a motion to, for Great Lakes Security Hardware to, install, handicap doors, at the cost of $4,380.
Okay. Motion by Mr. York, Oop. Support by Mr. Witt. I think also part of the reason was if you read on, the advanced door quote, they give an alternate, to reuse some existing components, and you could deduct 4,200, but I still think, the cost would be better with.
That's
Great Lakes.
5,700.
Yeah, right.
$5,700.
And I think there was a hope that we might, between the agenda, setting the agenda and getting this, get more quotes back in, but we weren't, so that was the reason why it was blank.
Well, do you wanna go with the 41?
No, I'm good with that, I'm good with the motion, I was merely offering the explanation.
So is
the
Great
difference
Lakes
in price.
Security Hardware gonna reuse the existing stuff like this guy suggested that he could knock off to $41.90 if we did that?
No, it's new. They're
Everything's-
using the buttons again. That's the part of the hardware that's being reutilized.
Okay.
So it's new door equipment up above. The control panels were shot and the motors were shot. So that's what's being replaced. So that price below included the replacement of those operators and the controls down below, but that's, not needed.
All right,
Okay.
any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Witt to authorize Great Lakes Security Hardware to replace the handicap doors at the engineering building at a cost of $4,380. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries.
I didn't get the quote, so I didn't care, whatever, think is best.
Okay. All right, we'll open up the floor for public comment. Public comment can be on any subject. We ask that you try to limit that to 5 minutes.
Mr. Supervisor, did we miss one? There was this
I don't think so.
beautification commission, did we, or that was part of the consent
Consent,
agenda?
yep. Yep.
Sorry, excuse me.
That's all right, no problem.
Good evening, gentlemen and lady. I'm Paul Thone, and I'm at 38701 Town Hall, and I'm going to, want to talk about the Beechwood Special Assessment District. My wife and I have been working very, very hard on this successful, to object to it and to have a actual, do whatever's necessary to object to it. And at the April, what we've been told is that we need the signatures of the husband and wife of of anybody that is objecting to the special assessment district. And that's not what we were told at the meeting on April 24th. On the April 24th meeting, you said if you had an objection, you could do it here, one person. And in fact, my wife and I did object as husband and wife. However, there were many, many other people that objected to it individually. Now, the problem is that the signature of anybody on the title is onerous, in that you've already told us that all we needed to do is have one signature or object at the meeting. So why is it that we're now required to have signatures of everybody that's on the title? Now, the majority of the people that own property in Harrison Township and in this special assessment district are husband and wife, and therefore they own it as entireties, meaning one person can determine everything that's necessary by themselves. Or a lot of them also own it by a trust. And if you own it by a trust, all you need is one of the trustees. And so what you're doing is you're putting extra burden on the people that are objecting to this special assessment district. And I think that we should determine that only one person that owns the property, whether husband, wife, trustee, is necessary to sign the petition. And the other thing is that I think it's that if we don't want this special assessment district, we should be able to make sure that it's easily objected to, and that's not what's happening. My wife and I put together some language for the special assessment district, and the clerk said, no, you have to use my language. And that's not right, because the petition to object to a special assessment district should be developed by the people that are objecting, not the clerk.
Thank you.
William Bardell, 20-year resident. I wasn't gonna comment on that, but that just blew my mind. I don't understand why two people, I tell you what, 80% of the time, my husband and wife are not home at the same time. I tell you that right now, so. Anyway, that is, was that the same thing they did when they figured out that bridge, out there? I mean, North Point sub, there was two people signed that for that bridge. I mean, very rarely the husband and wife are at home at the same time. When you're having people knock on doors. So it just blew my mind. I can't even fathom it. I can't even imagine it. But anyway, I just want William Bardell, 20-year resident. I just want to remind everybody to please visit Save Lake St. Clair on Facebook and get involved. And before I start reading about the dumping in our wonderful lake, I just want to tell everybody, board members and residents, to please stay safe this Memorial Day weekend and pace yourself and take a minute to thank all who have served and all who have given all for our country. And so what I want to talk about is I'm going to be meeting with some top officials on this dumping, and I don't know if I'm going to get the flim-flam answers. I don't know if they're going to pat me on the back and buy me a cup of coffee and buy me a plate of nachos, or if they're going to give me the real answers. I will say one thing. The cream rises to the top. If anyone is passionate about an issue and you believe in that issue, I would tell board members and residents to please get involved. Remember, the cream rises to the top. No matter what it is, it's all about what you want. So if you want mediocrity and you want to strive for mediocrity, you'll get mediocrity. If you want excellence, you strive for excellence. Sooner or later, you will have excellence. So I want to take a minute right now and tell everybody, I didn't get the data, but our friends in Warren dumped into our wonderful lake on 5/5/2017 to 5/9/2017. And they dumped 67.15 million gallons of sewage into our wonderful lake. What I want to also tell you is that this sewage that gets dumped is supposed to be partially treated. There's no actual live validation, and we were talking about redundancy a little earlier today in direct digital controls and all the new technology. And would you believe that these retention basins do not have any live streaming validation that the water is getting partially treated? Any retention basin is nowhere near the processing that Detroit Wastewater Treatment delivers. Detroit Wastewater Treatment skims the stuff, sends it up a conveyor belt into a flame, and they cook the residual poop after it's strained. Then they purify and clean the water, and they ship it back in the Detroit River. It's not for drinking, but you can swim in it. So there's no comparison to the way Detroit Wastewater Treatment Center processes the water when we flush our toilet or wash clothes. A retention basin is only a second tier for when you have leaky pipes in the ground that are sewage pipes. When those sewage pipes develop a head pressure approximately half to 5/8 full, they develop a pressure. Well, we have broken sewer pipes all over every single township in Michigan and all over the United States. This infrastructure is between 50 to 100 years old. Nobody's put money into this infrastructure. So when you have these leaky pipes, the rainwater gets into these leaky pipes from the ground. What happens is, if that sewage pipe gets more than half to 5/8 full, it builds a pressure, a head pressure. To relieve that pressure, it goes into a retention basin, over a little wall into a retention basin. Just one more minute, please. I appreciate that. And when it goes to that retention basin, it never gets pumped back up to Detroit to be fully processed. Once it goes to that retention basin, they might shoot it with a little bit of bleach and ship it out in the lake. So that's why you got all this muck. This muck is a cocktail of human DNA poop. Sure, there's rotting vegetation and so forth, but you have a cocktail of rotting stuff with human feces in it. So I'm going to be talking to some top officials. Hopefully, I'm not going to get the old flim-flam, bull garbage, snake oil, BS, But I'll see what happens. I will report back to you folks and the citizens of our wonderful township. Again, please, everybody, visit Save Lake St. Clair on Facebook. And please, everyone, have a safe, wonderful Memorial Day. Please stay safe and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. I don't know if you'd prefer to answer. I know that one of the residents had some questions about signatures and objections.
Sure. First off, the petition forms that my office prepared, that was as a service simply. The law allows written objection to be filed prior to the public hearing. Any written objection is sufficient to meet that, but they had asked for a petition to be signed. So our office prepared those based on that request from Mr. York. Ultimately, the law allows written objections to be filed prior to the close of that
Objection period.
objection period, which the board has extended beyond what the law requires. As far as the signature requirement, under the state act, it says that the board cannot move forward with a petition unless, if there is a signature of the record owners of land constituting more than 20% of the total area. So, based on that language, which matches the by record owners of land constituting more than 50% of the total area for a petition moving forward, in consultation with the township attorney, we recommended to the petitioners that they get signatures from husband and wife, if husband and wife both appear on the property. That's what we require as a board from petitioners for petitions asking for a special assessment. So we sent, the decision was that because the language is identical in state law, if the legislature had intended something different, they would have used different language. Furthermore, in the law, it clarifies that the way we check if those signatures and that petition is valid is based on checking that against the Register of Deeds records. The Register of Deeds records shows those two property owners on there. Ultimately, this board is the one during the public hearing process that determines the validity of anything, whether it's a petition for or against that. So if they submit something that might not live up to that and this board chooses to say, you know, we still want to accept that, just like we did for the deadline for hearing objection to it, where we took action to extend that, the board could say, you know what, they got 15%, but, you know, they tried their hardest, so let's say that they got 20, or whatever this board wants to do. So ultimately, that's a decision that lies with these 7 here, so.
Well, I think ultimately, that decision needs to be, and I talked to Mr. Huth, and you know that me and you have been arguing this point for 2 weeks. And Mr. Huth ultimately said that it was up to this board to decide if the 1 or 2 signature requirement needed to be met. I don't want to mischaracterize that at all. Is that,
Well, let me, what I said is, when the board gets the signatures back, if some of them have 2 names and some of them have 1, and the board decides one's good enough for us, yes, I did say the board could accept the petition if it chooses. Yes, I agree.
all right, so the question is it 1 signature or 2? So this is my argument on this. And when you have a citizen-driven SAD, right, they go out and they have to get all owners of record, because essentially what you're doing is you're making a legally binding contract to put a lien on your own property. That's what you're essentially doing when you're doing an SAD process as a community-driven thing. If either one of those people say no, then they can't do it. That is not a yes vote for that petition to move forward. In the inverse, though, since the township board went ahead and voted to put this on the people, it wasn't a signature-driven process, it was a board-driven process. It would seem to me that the same you do on the citizen-driven, that if one person said no, then that would be good for everybody. Because you need to have 2 yes votes to bind people to lien themselves. And like the gentleman said, you only need 1 person to get up there at the podium at the hearing in opposition to petition the tax tribunal.
Right, but
So
those
I
are
think-
different,
so I-
those
so-
are different sections of the law
So
that set out different standards for those 2 different
while I
items.
understand that, I think that they deference would be to making it easier for people to be in opposition. For example, if my wife and I vote no, she votes yes. She can't bind me. It should be a no. That's the assumption here is that people want to be assessed, right? The board didn't go out and get 2 signatures from every person to put this on. There was a majority of the board, they voted yes, end of story. So I would think that just like you do in the citizen-driven, you have 1 person in opposition, well, that house doesn't count. The same should go in the inverse in this case. And I mean, whatever this board decides, I think they need to decide whether it's all the owners of a property, if just 1 objects. I mean, common sense would dictate that, you know, if you own a business, right, and somebody's buying your business, you would need all of the shareholders to, you know, if you had three shareholders, you know, three of them would have to sell the business. If one is in opposition, then it's in opposition. You don't assume a yes vote. That's my point. We assume a yes vote, but to get a no vote, you need to have everybody sign it. That doesn't make sense. That lacks what normally happens in life.
And I think you and I have a fundamental disagreement on what, you're not voting no, you're voting yes, I don't want to do this.
I understand your argument.
Well, here's my spin on it. Make no mistake that you're not doing the township residents in this SAD any favor. Mr. Verkest stated multiple times that he didn't feel that there was anything to petition against until we actually approved the SAD. So therefore, and there's ambiguity in the law too. It says meeting, it doesn't say what meeting. There's multiple public hearings. But that said, I agree with Mr. York. The people are already on the hook for this. They're in the SAD, we approved it. If they don't get enough signatures, then they will be assessed this, whatever their numbers are. And every one of the owners is gonna be responsible for it. If one of the owners doesn't want this, then they should have some recourse to opt out of it. Now, if I understand Mr. Huth, he's being, sitting on the fence about this, and the people that are circulating, which I'm not one of, I'm not even in this SAD, but I feel that what's right is right. If I try to get a month at the time to for the signatures, if in fact they're going to have two signatures, then we didn't give them enough time. Plus, I asked if you were going to prepare, Mr. Witt, if you were going to prepare petitions, and you said no. Then 10 minutes later, you said, yeah, I would if someone came and asked for them. All right, that didn't happen until a week after the meeting where we approved 3 weeks.
Right, because I didn't get asked until that Friday at about 10 o'clock in the morning through my office that there was a petition. So don't say that we didn't do it until we did it within 2 hours of being asked.
But I do know that petitions have a start date and an end date. If someone would have got a signature prior to the 8th, I believe it was, you could have called it invalid because it was signed prior to the date that we had the.
You can
Again,
change your argument during that, but you have no basis in what you're saying.
Again, back to what Mr. Huth said, if we as a board said, well, a signature prior to a particular date still holds validity, we can acknowledge it. I think it's important to understand, one of the residents asked, did two people sign for the bridge SAD? And the answer is no, no one signed a bridge SAD because there was no petition. The homeowners association came forward, asked us to proceed with it without collecting signatures because they believe that a majority of the people would want to participate in that. We went through a notification process. It's important to also note that the clerk's office didn't prepare a petition in that case because no one ever came and asked to petition to oppose that. Not one person opposed that SAD. So we don't, every time someone asks to move forward on something, we don't prepare it anticipating what they might feel